Welcome to the Lunch and Learn Marketing Series. This is the first of 4. And today's session is called Everyone, Everywhere, All at Once, with a question mark, which we're going to address today. The second one is storytelling for your business. And then the third one will be all things website, which will incorporate your target marketing and storytelling, among other topics. And the fourth one is how to take the stress out of your business plan by pulling everything we talked about in these sessions together along with your finances. And so hopefully we are ready to close the poll and share the results.
We still have some
coming in.
They're still coming in, so let's give them a little bit more time.
Awesome. There's a few more questions than we sometimes ask because I'm going to try and tailor this workshop depending on what you say.
Yeah, so let's give folks another minute or two. We've got about 60% of people who've answered so far. All right. Give folks a few more seconds here if you can finish up the poll question.
We need the Jeopardy music.
We'll put that one in for next time. All right, we've got about 3/4. So I think I'm going to end the poll here, Kathleen, if that's good.
Great. Oh, they're still ticking up.
All right. You want to share the results here?
Yes, please.
All right. Can you see these?
Yes. Okay. So we've got a pretty good mix of business longevity. That's cool. Business type. Let's see what we get. Can you scroll?
Yep. Can you see it?
No. Maybe I have to scroll myself. Okay. Okay. 81% are professional service. Okay. Okay. That's a very high percentage. All right. Then we have no one's in farming. How many people work in your business? Everybody is either 1 or up to 10 people. So it could be 1 or 2 more people. How much have you heard about identifying your target market? Okay. No one says I never heard of this. Some people say I don't know what it means. 47% say I've heard about it, but no one's shown me how, which again, you're in the right place. And 40%, I've learned a lot and want a refresher. Okay. Good to know. All right. If you'd like me to talk about your business, how do we see what they typed? That's not helpful.
So I just clicked on, I've got a few here, Kathleen, that I just clicked on. Let me read them off for you.
Okay.
The first one is I offer writing and design services, so do a fair amount of marketing for clients, but it's never too late to learn more. We've got a Christian life coach, a restaurant, a recreational facility with canoe and kayak rentals, archery, dodgeball, and venues for all types of parties.
Okay.
We are digital transformation service providers, especially manufacturing industry and XR solutions.
Okay.
B2B consulting, non-medical home care agency, landscape design and fine gardening. And the person adds, I will be impressed if you can talk about this. And wall art.
Landscape, what was it? Landscape what?
Landscape design and fine gardening.
Design, got it.
And wall art. So a wide variety of business types here, which is great.
I know there's no way I can cover all these. So what I want to say is that I will probably only talk about 1 or 2, and I'm going to have to wing it because I did prepare some examples in case nobody shared. So now I'll be having to make this up as we go. So you'll see how good I am at making stuff up as I go. But it's really good because it will, the more I can help you, the better. And whoever I don't talk about, that's why we left so much time at the end for Q&A, because we can get into your specific questions, especially if you have some experience at doing this. and you're trying to hone it down further. So thank you so much, so many of you, for sharing like that. That's super great, and I really, really appreciate it. All right, so now I'm going to be thinking on the fly, which is always good. All right, skipping past here. Target market. So you already heard that about 80%, 87% of you, based on the poll, know you're supposed to choose a target market. And you've all heard you're more successful that way because your target market is an emphatic yes. And so to just give you a phrase to remember for yourselves, clarity connects, confusion rejects. So people don't just reject you because they don't like you. They more often reject you because they don't understand what it is you do and whether it's really for them or not. But it can often feel too scary to narrow down your market, especially if you're just getting started. And I know that many of you have been in business for at least a year, so you're not just getting started. But even so, it can feel scary. And there's reasons for that. One, it's hard to hit the bullseye right from the beginning. If you've ever played darts or archery, you know how hard it is to even hit the target, never mind hit the bullseye. So it takes practice to get good at hitting the bullseye. And then we all say to ourselves, what about the rest of the target? Like, I'm missing out on this whole thing. Isn't it good enough to be on the target? And then what about the whole rest of the world? And then what if my product is really needed by everyone? And then what if I choose and I get it wrong and nobody buys my product? So that's the reality of many of us when we think about our business. So what do? We do this. We cast the biggest net possible and trawl for all the fish in the sea. But what's the problem with that plan? You get a lot of stuff you don't want. Fish that aren't edible, that are too small. You get plastic and other ocean junk in your net. And you spend effort and money that's wasted. And it can take as long to weed out the ones that you don't want and that don't really want you as it would to catch the fish, the correct fish in the first place. And yet it feels completely counterintuitive to choose a smaller audience, but you can often make more sales and profits with the right audience. So if you think of the customer journey of people starting on the path and then making the ultimate decision to make a sale. And you think of that as a funnel, which is what you see in this picture, with people entering at the top and working their way to the bottom, then the narrower the top, the more targeted your marketing is. Your focus is more on the bullseye. And when you do that, you get a higher conversion rate out the bottom. And you also want people to decide quickly if your product is for them or if it isn't. You want a clear yes or a clear no, because as I said, confused or uncertain people don't buy. You only want people who are yes, yes, totally yes, a 9 or a 10 on a 1 to 10 scale. Now, you can insist on a large funnel opening like the picture on the right. But what that means is that you now have much more complicated marketing. Now you've got multiple marketing campaigns, because if you've ever bought clothes that say one size fits all and you know that's totally not true, they kind of don't fit anyone, the same is true if you try to open your funnel super wide and do a generic marketing campaign, one size fits no one. So generic marketing to a generic group of people yields no results. If you confuse, you lose. People need to see themselves in the story that's in your marketing. And we'll talk about that in more detail in the second workshop. So 87% of you have heard this before and perhaps even believe it's true and perhaps even tried to practice it. And you might still feel nervous about doing it, or you just don't know how. 47% of you said, everybody talks about it, nobody shows me how. So we're going to show you how today. Now, a lot of times people try to get you to go straight to the target, and we're going to come about it the opposite way. Instead of choosing what you're going to do, we're going to rule out what doesn't apply to you until you're left with a smaller funnel. So we're going to be artists. In fact, we're going to be sculptors. We're going to start with a block of marble, and we're going to work our way, chipping pieces of the marble away until we end up with a sculpture. So there'll be several criteria that you're going to use and work your way through the process of how do I chip away at the marble to get to my sculpture. The first one is, does your product or service have a built-in limit? A grocery store, which is what you see on my screen, is a classic example of a business that does not have a built-in limit. Everyone needs food. On the other hand, you have the extreme opposite, which is nursing bras or reproduction 1960 Corvette turn signals. Clearly, people who want those two items are on the other end of the extreme, but most of us are somewhere in between. Based on what you all said, several of you, I would say almost all of you, are somewhere in between the everyone and the almost no one extreme. So it's not that cut and dry. Even if you say landscape design and fine gardening, well, that limits it somewhat, doesn't it? Because it's fine gardening. It's not just the generic throw a couple shrubs in front of the house and see what happens. Non-medical home health care, that's in the middle too, because not everybody needs health care and not everybody needs non-medical health care, but still there's a pretty large group of people that might want what you're doing. And a life coach, same thing. Most of what you described is somewhat limiting, but not completely. So what you want to do first is say, I had this block of marble, which was the entire world. I now narrowed it down to at least say people who are looking for what I do. And that's still, could be pretty big. So your product or service might have given you the outline of your sculpture, and that's as far as you've gone. And you're going, great, it still doesn't really look like a sculpture. All I did was sort of etch in the stone and yeah, cool. So now we have the second parameter or criteria that you're going to use to try to chip away at this marble. And I'm calling it the innovation curve. In fact, that's what everyone calls it. So if your product is extremely innovative, then the more you want to market to the people who are way on the left-hand side of this curve. And that's going to severely limit the number of people, especially if it's extremely innovative, which may be the digital transfer one. I don't know enough about that business to really know quite what that is, but even that might not be so unique. But let me give you an example of something that could be. Oh, and then let me talk about the rest of the curve first. So if you're extremely innovative, if your product is totally new in the market, nobody's ever heard of it, or you're doing something in an innovative way and you get the people on the left, it's a small group, but the marketing to them is going to be extremely different, because they care about status, and where they get status is from being the first people to do anything. If they're the innovators, if they're the early adopters, they want to be the cool people that are pretty new to something. And then everybody else falls behind. And you only need about 10% on the left in order to reach some kind of a tipping point before you can start hitting the early majority. On the other hand, if what you market is extremely comfortable, if it's I want to make you feel better about yourself, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that in just a minute, then you might want the people at the other extreme. Now, it's very tempting to go for the middle. The problem is that's where everybody is. So if you want to market to the middle, you're competing against Amazon and Walmart and Coca-Cola and anybody else who's a Home Depot, anybody else who's a large company and has a huge marketing budget. So to some degree, it's easier to go for the people on either extreme, but it does depend on your product. And so we're going to try to find other differentiators if your product or service is really in that middle spot, which looks like a sweet spot, but is a little more challenging. So I'm going to give you an example with a coffee shop. And the same could be true of this restaurant owner. Although I'm not quite, because I don't know exactly what your restaurant is. It's a little harder for me to tell. But so let's say you have a new way to make coffee that nobody's doing. You found some guy somewhere, when you were traveling, and he invented this new way of making coffee, and you think it's really cool, and you're like, this is it. Or you're adding ingredients to coffee that no one else is doing. Now you're going to ignore almost all the curve. The same thing could be true of a restaurant. Fusion is kind of a thing now where people are like, yeah, it's a little bit of Japanese and it's a little bit of this. And, when you see like Mexican plus Indian or something like that, if you have an extremely innovative either ingredient theme, like it's all root vegetables, or it's all, because farm to table is kind of a thing, so you'd have to be even more unique to that, like it's my farm, and oh, by the way, you get to be on the farm. Anything you do like that that's different, now you're talking about the left side of the curve. If you're a personal trainer, there was somebody who was doing recreational thing. It could be similar with the recreational business. If you had a brand new high interval technique that combines, say, hip hop dance with yoga and ropes, that leaves out almost everybody on the innovation curve. And you're going to focus on the far left. If you're mixing, say, intermittent fasting and a newer form of meditation, now you're kind of talking about the mid left. And if it's weights and Zumba, it's way over to the right, because those are like 10 or 15 years old. So most people have moved on to something else, but there's a group of people that says, hey, I liked weights and Zumba and nobody's doing it anymore. So you could capture the right side of the market. And now you feel different because you're so old, it's like retro and cool. So you have to figure out how to find these people who are on the various parts of the curve, but at least you know who they are. And the more clear you can be about who they are, now you're going to market differently. Because now you're going to research to find out what else they like and hang out where they hang out. And then you learn how to speak their language. Now, one of the things I want to say here is that if you yourself are kind of a late majority person and you want to market to the innovators, it's going to feel weird and it might come across as fake. Or if you tend to be early to things, the one to jump on the bandwagon, you were one of the first ones on TikTok or whatever, or you jumped on ChatGPT the second week it came out, you might not want to market to the laggards because they're going to feel like you're not authentic. You can push it if you're close to where you think you want to be, but if you're not personally, it becomes a little more challenging. So you might want to reconsider what you're doing while it's still in the idea stage. This is something people often don't think about. And so as you can see, if you get this and you really think about this, you can chip away at a little bit more of the marble. And it's a little bit hard if you're doing something that feels like it could be potentially for everyone. So I want to really encourage you to think about it, especially the person who said they're a life coach, because that could run the gamut. Some people say they're a life coach, but they're really a performance coach, or they're really one person I know specializes in performance, and his main thing is alter ego. And he talks about how an alter ego can help you. So it's completely unique to him. And he tends to get early adopters and high performers. So people who are doing something that's a little more competitive, where there's a lot of people already doing it, you want to think about this and how can you move your offering so that it's closer to one of the ends of this curve. All right, so now we've got that one. Now we're on to the third one. We've done your product and service, chipped away, innovation curve, chipped away a little more. Now we get to the third one. Where are people on the problem or aspiration scale? This one on the screen is the problem scale. I'll show you the aspiration scale in a minute. So as you can see, there's a triangle. The people who might potentially need your product or want your product or fit your product and who are appropriate on the innovation curve, now they get broken down into smaller groups. The people who are actively ignoring what you have are the largest group. So it's tempting to go for them. And as you can see, aware and looking is the smallest group in this pyramid. They're the ones you want to focus on primarily. And the reason they're aware and looking, what that means is they have a specific problem that your product or service solves. They're actively looking for a solution to that problem. As opposed to, yeah, I know I have a problem, but I don't really believe it's possible to solve it. Or I've tried to solve it before and no one was able to help me. Or everyone's just trying to sell me stuff, convince me. They are a little bit easier to overcome because at least they're aware they have a problem. And if the problem becomes burning enough, they may become aware and looking. If they're not aware that they have the problem that you are seeking to solve, now you have to convince them that they have a problem before you can convince them that you can help them to solve it. And if they're at the bottom where they're actively ignoring it because on some subconscious level, they know they have a problem and they don't want to see it, they're going to be even more challenging to overcome. So it looks like the group at the top is smaller, and it is, but they are going to be the ones who are going to have a higher engagement. And sometimes they will actually look for you. And I'll give you an example. Since one of our people is a restaurant owner, my dad is 89 and he's having some trouble walking lately. And so when a restaurant is dark and has a lot of steps, he doesn't want to go there. And we were trying to find a place to take him for Father's Day this Sunday. And so we purposely started going to Google, looking for restaurants that were in his area that had food he would like, that were light and bright and didn't have a bunch of steps. So we were aware and looking, and as soon as we found one, bam, we made a reservation. Nobody had to work hard to convince us, oh, come here, we have this, we have that. We were like, meets our criteria, perfect. And oftentimes people like this are willing to pay more. And I will tell you, the restaurant that we made a reservation at, we definitely were willing to pay more because it fit our criteria and we want our dad to be happy. Now, one of the things I want to make sure you know is that sometimes, and the life coach or the non-medical home care or the landscape design person, sometimes people will say they have problem X, and you know the real problem is problem Y. But what you want to do in your marketing and when you're looking for your target client, which means you're going to be speaking to them directly, is make sure you speak to the problem they think they have, not the one you know is underneath the one they think they have, because they're looking for what they want, not looking for what you know. So you can solve their actual problem, but you have to speak to the problem they think they have first. And here's another example of what I mean in real life. Salad tongs. I had salad tongs, and this is what the typical salad tongs look like. You got one hand with the spoon thing and one hand with the fork thing, and you go to dish the salad out, great. But now the problem is that if I want to hold the salad bowl and scoop the salad out at the same time, I now need 3 hands. So I look for salad tongs that let me use only one hand, and oftentimes they have a handle, like say this. And I go, great, so now you solved my scoop the salad problem, but now I have a storage problem because these salad tongs, put them in the drawer and they back to back and they don't take up much space. These salad tongs have a handle that goes one way and the tongs go in the other direction, and now they're taking up twice as much space in the drawer. So now I have two problems I want to solve: scooping salad and storage. And so what do I find? These, because these have a hinge. And when they're hinged one way, they fold flat, they go in the drawer, flip them around the other way, and they scoop the salad. So now that has solved two problems. And I went looking for these until I found them. So I was clearly one who knew I had a problem, and I was actively looking for a solution. And that's what you want. All right. So let's say your product or service doesn't actually solve a problem, but is more aspirational. So here's where you tap into desire. And it's not just desire for the thing, because oftentimes what's underneath a desire for the thing is a desire for status. So if somebody thinks their status will go up only slightly, or maybe not really, and they just want the thing, whatever it is, then they have a mild interest in your product or service. If they think that their status could go up a decent amount, or there's a slight fear that they'll lose status if they don't do it, now they have a strong interest. And if they could get a large status improvement, or they have a huge fear of losing status if they don't have this product, then they have a burning interest. And some examples of things like that, depending on the circle that you hang out in, would be like Rolex watches, where everyone's looking at everyone's wrist to see what their watch is, or a high-end car like a Jaguar or a Porsche or whatever, or high-end scotch. So again, there are fewer people with a burning interest, and sometimes your product isn't really like that. So, but what you want to do is position it so it's one or the other. It's either a high status thing, or it is a high problem solving thing. And if you can couple this with the innovation curve right there, you can chip away at a whole bunch of people. And keep in mind, if you're going for people at the high innovation and high problem or high status, it can sometimes take a while to get the first one, because they have to believe that this is really going to give them what they're looking for in order for them to go for it. Yes, they want to be first at the curve, but they also don't want to look like an idiot for picking the wrong cool new thing. So it can take a while to get to the first one. And so some ways you can do that is appeal to their pride at going first, and make sure that you reinforce their desire to be cool or whatever it happens to be. Because once you get the first one, those people who you really solved their problem, or you really gave them high status, they will tell all their friends. And people at the front end of the innovation curve are much more likely to spread things than people at the back end, because they decided it was cool. They want to be innovators. And so what they want is everyone to follow them now, because they just found the coolest new thing. So you can imagine, if whatever your business is right now, if you're thinking along those lines, like, how can I tap into this? Not in a fake way, in a real way, to say, how can I tailor what I do to really target people like this? A perfect example is the person who said, oh, landscape design and fine gardening, and also wall art. If your wall art is really unique, now you can potentially tap into this high innovation curve. And you can also tap into the status thing, because if your art becomes the cool one to have, then people are going to be flocking to buy it. Or if your designs are really different, if everybody who drives by the house that you worked on and your sign is in front and they go, that's so different. It's not just boxwoods or arborvitae in the front of the house or azaleas like everybody else, but I can tell it's designed on purpose. It looks really different. It looks like I went to Elizabeth Park or whatever. then all of a sudden now you're rising on this status pyramid, and now people are going to be flocking to your service. All right, so we did your product or service itself. We did the innovation curve. We did the problem or aspiration scale. And now we have the price point or the economic tier. What is the price point of your product or service? And what income tier would people be in who are willing to pay the price? And where do those people hang out, and what else do they like? Now, the interesting thing is, depending on what it is, some people are willing to pay a lot of money for one thing that really matters to them, even if they don't normally spend a lot of money on other things. So just because your product or service might be higher priced, don't rule out people who might be somewhat below the income tier that you think they might normally fit. Because, like I said, some people are willing to pay extra for one specific thing. And what I mean by that is, sometimes people will hire a business coach, even though they wouldn't normally pay that kind of money, because they believe strongly that it's going to make their business more successful. Sometimes people will hire a personal trainer if their health is really on the line. And they'll hire a personal trainer at a higher price than they would if they just go to the membership, get whatever the personal trainer is at the gym. So this is where you want to really think hard, because pricing yourself there's no science to this. And I'm not talking about the specific price, but kind of where you fit on the spectrum. Sometimes you might price yourself too high, and we often think about it that way. You can also price yourself too low. So if you are high on the innovation curve and you are high on the problem or status scale, you do not want to be super low on the price point, because those people aren't going to be looking for low, because they're going to think, ew, low status, low price, low status. So you want in order to hone down your target market, you want to be able to more clearly align all these items, because that's what's going to chip away at the marble and make the sculpture. Another thing I will say, similar to what I said about the innovation curve, if you personally haven't been willing to pay high prices for something like what you're selling, it's going to be hard for you to market at that price. And I know this sounds weird, but your emotions about that, you're going to have a disconnect. You're going to feel uneasy about marketing. Say you're a life coach and you never paid for life coaching, but now you're going to charge for it yourself, and you're going to charge a relatively high price per hour. Those emotions, you're going to be conflicted inside, and it's going to show through. And people won't buy from you, even if they can't tell you why they didn't buy from you. So if you're a coffee shop and you're going to open one and you've never paid more than $3 for a cup of coffee, and you're going to charge $6 or $10 for a cup of coffee, don't do that. If you're a personal trainer and you've always taken the classes at the gym that came with your membership, and now you're going to be that and charge high prices, don't do it, because you are going to be so internally conflicted, it's not going to work. So again, you need to feel like you're part of the group that you're marketing to some degree. The more you're close, at least close to the part of the group you're marketing to, the more authentic it will be, because people can smell fake a mile away, and that will automatically turn them off. So this is a hard one. And so here, what you might want to do, rather than go straight for a number or a range, you might want to rule out who wouldn't pay my prices. And again, sometimes they wouldn't pay my prices because they're too low, and sometimes they wouldn't pay my prices because they're too high. And so once you get rid of the people who wouldn't, now you can look at who's left. And if it's a small enough group, you're good. And if it's not, you might have a choice to make, or you might just try one and see what happens. So now we get to the people. Who do you feel the most comfortable with? Because almost all of you, 81% of you, are doing something where it's a profession or it's a service. This is really important because you're not necessarily selling an item on your website and people just go buy it. Now you are inserted into the equation. So who do you feel the most comfortable with? Who do you relate to the best? Who do you love working with or serving? Who speaks the same language as you? The more you use the language they're already using, the more you relate to them and the more effective your marketing is going to be. For example, if you've got a coffee shop and you might say, oh, I really relate to young moms who are stopping between dropping off their kids and going to work, so they're in a hurry. Now I'm going to tailor my coffee shop for speed and a friendly voice and a handshake or whatever it happens to be, but I know they're in a hurry. As opposed to people who are working from home and need a break, as opposed to creative entrepreneurs who want stimulation while working and are going to sit there, in which case now I'm going to tailor the ambiance to them and I'm going to have more food because they might sit there for 3 hours while they're working and I don't want to just sell them one cup of coffee. I want to sell them other stuff. So the more interaction you're going to have with people, the more important this one is. And so you really want to get real with yourself and say, if I could have anybody I want to work with, what are they like? And what do they do? And how do they talk? And so I can talk just like them. If you do B2B consulting, again, that could be a wide range. So what kind of B do you like to consult with? What size are they? What type of personality do you like to work with? Some people like to reassure people, make them feel comfortable. Some people can't stand that and are like, oh my gosh, no, I need a positive person who's a real go-getter and just hasn't found the right tools yet. So I know for myself, I'm not super great with people who are at 0 or -0 and have to climb out of a hole. That's just not my personality. My personality works better with people who are already pretty good at what they do and they want to get to outstanding. So it's important for you to know that about yourself and then really think about this and start building that into your profile so that you can chip away at the marble and make the sculpture. So now it's time to put it all together. You got your product or service. That may or may not narrow it down. And for all of you who responded anyway, it narrowed it down at least a little. Then you have the innovation curve. Where does your product or service naturally fit, or how can it be tailored so that it does fit? And then you have the problem and aspiration scale, you have the price point, and then you have the people that you want to work with best. So what's left? After you've chipped away at all the ones that don't fit, how much is left? It might be a really small group, or it might be still a pretty large group. Especially if what you did is you said, I don't want this, and I don't want that, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. You still may be left with, I do want 2/3 of the innovation curve, or 2/3 of the price point, or 2/3 of the problem spectrum. So now what you want to do is take the group and narrow it down for now. You want to choose one group out of the pile and create a profile of that group and make it as detailed and as emotional, as compelling as you possibly can. Because now you're no longer a sculptor, you're a sailor. And the sculpture is the masthead on the boat. So it's part of what drives you toward where you're going. Because think about this. What's the most likely group to put the wind in your sails to move your business forward? So let's say I'm the landscape design person. Only people, when I start with my product, Only people who actually want to pay someone to design their thing, who don't want to do it themselves for whatever reason. That already narrows it down. Because a lot of people might want to pay someone to do the work, but they don't necessarily want someone to design for them. And then innovation. How innovative are my designs? Are they pulling in some things from 16th century British rose gardens or whatever, walled gardens? Are they so different from everybody else that you can tell at a glance it's mine? Where do they stand on the innovation curve? And then how burning is the problem? Have they tried it themselves already? And if so, it's been a disaster, or they hired a landscaper to come and do work for them, but it was based on their own design, or they were just landscapers and really didn't do design, even though they kind of said they did, and they don't like the way it looks. So when you think about stuff like that, now you think about how you can market, how you can speak to those people, because you could say, maybe you've already got stuff in your yard and you're ready to rip it all out because it's not working the way you thought. Now, these people, because you're doing design and you're probably going to either charge for that or your overall price is going to be higher, they're going to have to be willing to pay more and show their peers that they're innovative and successful by, oh, look what I did. And oh, by the way, I'm going to post pictures on Instagram. And they expect the highest quality. And they're quick to praise you when they love it, and they'll tell all their friends. And they will also tell all their friends if they don't like it. So if you write that profile and in the end you go, I don't know if I want to take a chance on that so much. I don't know if I want to be bad-mouthed all over the place if they don't like it, then don't do that. Then choose a different niche somehow. But if you're the kind that has total confidence in what you do, and you have every reason to believe that these people can work with you, then now you create the profile. Now, what you want to do also is make sure that you narrow it down to people who are willing to work with you and not be super, super demanding. So now your marketing copy is going to have to be pretty nuanced in that you want people who have good taste and are strong about their desire for good taste, but yet also aren't so nitpicky, and you're not going to say that obviously, but aren't so nitpicky that they're going to criticize everything you do or think they know better, and you're going to suss that out once you meet with them. So if you happen to catch some extra people in your net and you go meet with them, obviously if they act like that, you're going to go, yeah, not so much. So you want to try to make sure that you tailor your marketing so that it doesn't pull in those people in the first place, which can be challenging and take some practice. So when you put it all together like that and you pick those 5 things and you start listing them, and then you start saying, oh, now I see a profile becomes super clear. Now, as I said before, you are not stuck with your decision forever. If more than one group made it through all 5 steps, you can always change your mind. You can iterate your way into clarity, because you're better off picking the green yes and not trying to market to both yeses. And then deciding, you know what, the green yes, maybe it wasn't quite as clear as I thought. And so even though the pink yes looks less, I'm going to switch my marketing. I'm going to go for that and see what happens. And then if that doesn't work, now you start saying, maybe I need some blend of the two somehow. And so you can keep iterating and iterating and iterating. Whatever decision you make today, you are not stuck with forever. Make sure you have a website where you can change the copy at any time, and you don't have to get a web designer to go in and edit it. It's because that will help you. Or when you go to social media, you can just change your focus just a little bit, and you can do it over time if you want to. It doesn't have to be today it was this way and tomorrow it's that way. You could just start moving it little by little if you want, or you could just do a cold, hard switch. Because don't forget, clarity connects and confusion rejects. So when you speak to one group of people in the language they understand, and that group is already looking for what you do, it's more likely to keep you in business. So go for one, keep the other people on your list. Know that you had a pie chart that 2/3 of the people were out, but 1/3 was in, and you broke that 1/3 down and you picked group A, but group B is still sitting there available, and then you can always tweak things even more if you have to. So that's what I want you to remember, is you're not stuck with it forever. Now, sometimes it's helpful to iterate on the product too. Like if you do woodworking and you're selling on Etsy, you could decide, instead of making wooden bowls, you could decide that you want to make salad tongs that solve the salad tong problem, and you're good to go. Because sometimes the market moves. Sometimes you pick a product or service and people, and then the market moves and you got to iterate again anyway. So you want to pay attention to that and move with it or ahead of it. All right, so you've heard all I had to say. I tried to tailor it at least to some degree to what some of you said. So what comes after this workshop? Well, one, practice. Go through the 5 steps and see what drops out, and then try to narrow it down even more. You can come to the next 3 workshops so you can learn how to tell your story and how to turn your website into a sales machine and all that. And you can also talk this through with someone else. You can talk to a friend if you have a colleague or a SCORE mentor. So if you think you might want a SCORE mentor and you don't have one, Steve's going to put the poll up now and ask you, do you have a SCORE mentor or not? And if not, if you'd like to work with someone, if you'd like to know how you can work with someone, and we will be in touch with you and let you know how you can get a mentor if you want one. Now, in the meantime, while he's doing that, what's next right now? Now we have time for Q&A. And so if you've posted in the Q&A box and you want to ask me specific questions, I'm willing to hang around after our hour is up. And again, if you want to talk in more detail, you can ask to speak. And remember, if you have a confidential question, just mark it confidential and we'll save it for after the recording is turned off. So before we do turn off the recording, I want to thank you so much for coming, or before we turn it over to Q&A, I want to thank you for coming, and please feel free to ask any questions that you want if you haven't already in the Q&A. And so Steve, I think you can end the poll.
All right.
And let me know what's in the Q&A.
So we don't have any questions right now in the Q&A. So if folks have anything, feel free to type in a question and we'll get to that one. Actually, we just got one from Christine right now. Thank you. How long would you allow for testing out your narrowed down market choice, and what do you consider a good result?
I think you got to give it at least 6 months, because it takes a while to get traction. And a good result would be anything that gives you either more hits or really more business. I'm looking for more business or more, and especially at the beginning side, is more engagement. So if you have a call to action on your website, for example, that says, call me for an appointment, something like that, that you're getting more of those. And then if you get more of those and then they don't convert and the conversion rate isn't getting better, maybe it needs further tweaking, and you might want to tweak that a little sooner. So if people are taking the first action and then they're not converting in the end to being your customer, I would say you might want to tweak it sooner than 6 months, but only slightly, so that you're just finessing it a little bit as opposed to totally changing the approach, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you need some sort of credible sample size, if you will, to try to find some sort of pattern, right? Yeah. So we got a question.
It can take a while to find them too, you know, so going out and finding them can be challenging. And so if you've got people coming in now already, but they're clicking away before clicking on anything, then that's a good clue that you've got the first part of the funnel good, that they're getting to you in some way, either via Google search or because of you have a blog, or because you're posting on social media. And then if they're clicking away and not clicking on anything, then I would focus on your website itself. And then if they're clicking the first thing and then you're not converting, then I would focus on maybe the website needs tweaking just a little bit more.
That's good.
And feel free to ask a follow-up question if you have one.
Sure. So we've got Martina here. I have a hot sauce business. How do I decide which price point is good?
Oh boy, that can run the gamut, can't it?
Can.
So if your hot sauce is super, super, super hot, if it's ghost pepper something, that's going to be a really small group. I would up the price. If your hot sauce, and if it has really unique ingredients, or you grew the peppers yourself, or something like that, like it's going to depend on a lot of other factors. It's not simply, is it hot sauce? It's going to depend on other factors that are going to make it more status seeking. Generally, people don't have a hot sauce problem. Maybe they do. Maybe if hot sauce is not gluten-free, or hot sauce has all these extra artificial ingredients in it, and somebody's looking for all natural, vegan, something hot sauce, the more specific the hot sauce is, the higher the price can be. And again, feel free to ask a follow-up question if you have one.
Yeah, it's kind of like the uniqueness of the product, right? And I always, as you were going through the different lenses you talked about, I was also thinking about the competition, right? And how to think about who else is out there in your market and what's their price point. Because that can be an influence enough in terms of, are you differentiated enough from the competition that you can charge a higher price, right?
Mm-hmm. Because as a rule, you don't want to compete based on lower price, because you can't outcompete Amazon and Walmart.
Right.
So, and then you're just taking your margins away. So what you want to do is you want to market to the smallest possible group, which is why everybody tells you that, because you're solving a specific problem. So I'm gluten-free. I like to have only organic food. And so if somebody says to me, I have a hot sauce that has no extra ingredients in it, and so I know it doesn't have extra stuff that's got gluten in it, then I'm more likely to pay more for it. Or one of my friend's sons likes extra hot, and I'll pay way more for that hot sauce because it's a gift for him and I know he'll appreciate it. So definitely the more you specify what it is you're doing and the more different it is, the more you can charge.
And it sounds like
a few more. Go ahead, Steve.
It sounds like Martina's got that strategy. It's all natural, no preservatives, geared towards those that cannot stand excessive heat. So it sounds like narrowing in on that market, which is great. So we got a question from Rathan. What is the strategy to marketing and B2B for manufacturing segment in industry 4? Zero solutions like digital transformation and business process. Not quite sure I understand that one.
I'm not sure I understand that either.
If you could provide a follow-up, that would be helpful.
And I would say if that's how you talk to customers, it's going to be a little harder. The more you can not use your own lingo and use their lingo, the more successful it will be. Yeah. And maybe I just don't understand it because I'm not in that business, but I have a feeling manufacturers understand less about what you're describing than you do, and which is definitely a challenge we all have when we're marketing our own products, because we understand them thoroughly. And so we use terminology that oftentimes other people don't quite understand. Yeah. Is there a follow-up with that, or do you have another one, Steve?
Not yet, but we don't have a follow-up on that one yet, but and not anything else in the Q&A. Kathleen, do you have any more thoughts on kind of looking at the competition across some of the key takeaways you had today? Any further advice for any of the business owners?
Yes, I would say you want there to be competition in your market, but you don't want there to be competition in your specific niche of that market. So the more you can position yourself so that you are standing alone or almost alone in a segment, the better. So the hot sauce one was a really good example. Or so you want there to be lots of people who do what you do, so you know there's a market for it at all. But then on the other hand, you don't want lots of people to do it exactly the way you do. And that's why I gave the example of the coffee shop or the personal trainer. If you are doing something that's different from how everybody else does it, as opposed to the answer I get most often in my SCORE new client pre-work, when I say what makes how you deliver your product or service unique, 90% of the people say my passion for what I do. Well, if that's really unique, then 90% of the people wouldn't say that. So you want to find a way for it to be unique. If you're doing digital data transfer, is it your speed? Is it the fact that they can call you on the phone at any time? Is it the fact that you specialize in a specific type of data? Or is it that your data security is triple what everyone else's is? You want to find a way, or you understand the data better because it's a field that you've been in already. And so you don't just transfer data, you also understand it. If you're a recreational facility, if you don't try to market to every single person, but you say, okay, there's all these rec facilities and how many of them are doing kayaking? Well, what if I do kayaking what if I have some tours that are for people who are sight impaired and I have some way of hooking them together? I'm just making this up. It might be horribly dangerous. I'm just trying to think. You want to look at the competition and then say, where do they fit on all of those, the innovation curve, et cetera, and almost like scatter plot them in a way and say, how can I make mine be a scatter plot off by itself?
That's good advice. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A. Do we want to wrap things up?
We will wrap it up. So we're going to stop the recording. And thank you so much for coming. I also want to remind you that we will send you a link to the recording of this session. We host these recordings on our YouTube channel, which is Greater Hartford SCORE. So, and we have all kinds of other helpful videos on that channel. So while you're there, you might want to subscribe if you haven't already. And